Welcome to Pods with Posh and Pool, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
So today we are talking about freedom, and I have got the definition of freedom here. It says, the power or right to act, speak or think as one wants, or the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved.
So Jo, when we talk about freedom, we're talking about how do we be our true authentic selves. And I think when we are in authentic living, that's what it feels like to be truly free, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But how many people do you know or that you're surrounded by? Can you name many people that are free?
Well, I even think of myself and think, no, I'm on this journey to find freedom, and that must be our life destiny to actually come to a place. Or do we ever arrive? I mean, if you think about the most spiritual people we know, people in enlightenment, we never actually arrive. So our journey is to constantly find freedom or constantly find what we're looking for in life. We're constantly searching, aren't we? We all know there's more all the time. What is the more we're looking for?
I know, but when, like you just said, freedom is, or the way we're going to talk about today, is about authentic living. Now, I personally try to live authentically all the time. But, as you said, there's always them moments when you think, damn it, I'm not being quite authentic. And therefore, the freedom isn't quite there. And you're right, we are striving for it, but I think there are people who live their life in a certain way where they are free, yet as humans, we do keep getting dragged back into our subconscious or some old patterns of behaviour, and we have to heal from that.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense, because I was looking at the definition of being authentic and real, and it describes it as being the unimpeded operation of one's true or core self in one's daily enterprise. And that is also in line with being congruent with who we are, which means being aligned with our real values and needs, even at the risk of criticism or rejection. So what we're talking about is, if we are congruent, or if we're truly in authentic living, in theory we speak and live our truth according to our needs and values, regardless of whether we're going to be rejected or regardless of the consequences. So if we're constantly seeking affirmation from others, then we're not at peace with ourselves. Whereas if we love ourselves fully, we don't need affirmation from others, and we can be fully congruent. So I think it's also very much tied in with how much do we love ourselves and how much are we looking for affirmation from others, which we shouldn't need to do.
Absolutely. And that's where, when you look at a baby and a toddler and look how they behave, imagine this cute little toddler dressed in whatever outfit they pick up off the floor that day. They might have stripy socks on, a tutu, a face mask on, and a top with spots and on. Nothing goes, or as society would tell us, nothing goes. That outfit doesn't seem to appear to be correct. But the toddler has just put everything on. They feel great. They're standing in front of the mirror, checking themselves out. They might be dancing, having a great time, singing. They don't think that they're not okay. They are just totally free. Yet over time, they perhaps won't do that when they're 12 years old. They perhaps might wear what everybody else is wearing, and they won't sing and dance in front of the mirror because people might laugh at them. And I find that really sad, and I think that's where the whole freedom topic falls for me. And it's all about societal expectations. Why are we stopping people from being who they truly are, and why are we allowing that to happen?
Well, it's interesting because I was reading earlier, and science shows that up to the age of 18 months to 2 years, there's no sense of separation at all. And when a child or baby starts to realise they're separate from their mother or parents, then they start to seek identity. So then we form identity within the tribe that we're within. And in the teenage years, obviously, we want to separate from tribe because it's not cool to be part of our parents. We've got to separate and become healthy young adults. Therefore, we're looking for identity within our peer group. And social media obviously nowadays has such a large impact, doesn't it, to conform. And if you look at young teens today, it's extended eyelashes, it's fake tans, it's Botox lips, and it's becoming part of a sort of society expectation for that particular age group. And yet, when you get older, the constant striving is to find your own identity. And if you want to create a business with your own story, you want to be different. You actually want to be standing out from the tribe, don't you? So well, how do we separate from those teen years where we've got to be part of a tribe into adulthood where we say, yes, I want to find my true identity and become really me?
And can't we be part of a tribe while doing that though, as well? You know, and why are we so frightened to not allow the person who's a little bit different from us into our tribe? And you're right, as we get older, I love all weird and wonderful people. And look at some of the people we've had on our podcast. Like, you know, remember Jenny, for instance, and she talks about being weirdly wonderful with her facial disfigurement and stuff. And you know, she writes books about it, and it's about being accepting of others and their quirks. And I find people's quirks is what makes them so interesting. And I love that it makes the world so much more enriched having people like that around, rather than trying to everybody be the same. So I'd love the world to be more like, yeah, be part of a tribe, but allow everybody to be individuals within that tribe rather than trying to make everybody the same.
Well, it's interesting because there's a Centre for Yoga and Health in Lenox in Massachusetts, and the guy that runs it, Stephen Cope, opens his program and he asks attendees to reveal their deepest reason for being there, and 80% of the time people say some variation of, I'm here to find my true self. And he says that response is likely to come from young adults struggling to build careers and relationships, as much as from people in midlife re-evaluating their choices. They say, who am I? Now that I have a decent career and bought a house and had a marriage, I'm still feeling profoundly unfulfilled. And that's when it comes into midlife crisis, which is really interesting, isn't it? We have that constant, we go on retreats, we take time out, we go on holiday to really find ourselves. Or in the middle of marriage, you know, we disappear for a while to, again, find our true identity. And again, how hard it is. I mean, I was in a marriage only for 6 years, and it was a broken marriage, and I found it easier to find myself on my own rather than within a relationship. But actually how hard it is in relationships to still find your identity without merging into two people becoming one or having codependent relationships. How do we do that? It's actually quite hard.
Yeah, and I think, but again, if we allowed our children the freedom to be who they are rather than tell them that they can't do this and they must behave like that and this is necessary and no, then there wouldn't be that struggle when you do then find your relationship to find your identity, because you've been allowed to explore who you are right from early days. And if we could all be more accepting of everybody, there wouldn't be that internal struggle that everybody seems to be going through. Like the whole world, like, I mean, we all know we're in the grips of this mental health crisis, and a lot of that stems down to self-love, lack of identity, and that elusive search for happiness. You know, what you just said, like what the guy, the yoga studio, people, they get married, they're on the hamster wheel of life, they have a baby, they go on holiday, they buy a car, and then they retire or whatever, and they go, boom, I'm still not happy, and I'm still not free. And you know, they might have financial freedom, or they might have some type of freedom within that bracket, but they still don't find that happiness. And I think everything is a hand-in-hand kind of concept, isn't it? We talk about self-love, and once you do find that self-love, I think it gives you that empowerment to really know who you are and to be happy with who you are. And we had a conversation earlier about really loving your flaws and everything and falling in love with every part of you. And once you do that, it does come with a certain freedom and makes us feel lighter.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you know, increasingly psychologists believe that our notion of selfhood needs to extend to not just the parts of ourselves that we like and understand, but also those parts that we don't like. There's room to be a loving mother and sometimes yell at our kids, and a happy person who's sometimes sad. And the authentic self isn't always pretty, it's just real. And we were talking about that, weren't we? We were talking about, I can't change the fact that I'm divorced. Part of my journey is to look at all the amazing experiences I've had in my life, the travel, my career, having children, but not to then compartmentalize and say, well, I also got divorced and I regret doing certain things in my life. Actually, that's all my journey. My journey's good, it's bad, it's ugly, it's beautiful, it's raw, it's real, it's sad, it's happy. And when we stop living in duality but actually live with all parts of ourselves, then I think what we do is maybe try and not change the bits we don't like about ourselves, but learn to live with them and find the ugly bits beautiful. And I certainly think some of my trauma, I always thought my major story of trauma happened 17 years ago, and it still can be triggered today. And for a very long time, I was thinking, when I'm healed of that part of my life, I'll be perfect and free and happy. But now I've come to a place of thinking, when that part gets triggered, I find beauty in it, and that's the part of me I've learned to love.
Yeah.
Like my child, me, I can love and hold and nurture at those times I feel wobbly. So you're totally right. It's about accepting all parts of our lives, I think.
And freedom's such a big word and such a big concept, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, we do have responsibilities. So of course, you know, whoever you are in life, if you're a mother, father, son, daughter, you know, whether you go to work, whether you don't go to work, there is a level of responsibility within our life, and there are certain unwritten rules in life. But I think if we give people the freedom to be who they are, they would automatically live by certain rules anyway, because once you're loving yourself and you're free to be who you are and you don't have to worry about what other people think about you, with that comes a level of compassion, love, kindness. And again, people are born with these things. You know, we talk about building resilience. That's one of our main things that we're really passionate about. You can build resilience and you can learn resilience. However, things like kindness and compassion are inbuilt in us. You know, as you say, we were talking about toddlers before. If you're in the playground and you see two little toddlers, you see one fall over and the other one runs up often and wants to hug them or help them up. And you see it all the time in kindies. They are born with kindness and compassion. So yes, I know there's rules in life and we all want to go around and respect each other, and there's certain things that we have to do, like you might have to sit down in the classroom and you might have to do this. But we're more inclined to do all of them things and behave in a nice, pleasant manner to each other if we're feeling good about ourselves.
But you said something really interesting. You said it's much easier to allow other people to be free when you love yourself. So therefore, if you're listening to this podcast and you're raising children or teenagers, the challenge is, are you needing to heal yourself and you're trying to do it through your children? Are you trying to live your life through your children because you're not happy as yourself? Are you able to allow your children to be completely free in who they are because you love yourself, so you can let them go on their own journey? Because I lived in boarding schools for 15 years raising students, and parent-teachers meetings would all be about, I want my child too. And it was so interesting how many people even wanted to live their careers through their children because they wanted to become a lawyer or a doctor and they never did, so they want that for their children. And they will pick their children's subjects at school according to what they want them to do with their career at university. And I was shocked because I hadn't had children by then. And this comes back to my own parenting. Can I do that for my children? And the constant test is, am I able to set my child to be free to be who they want to be? Because I have these expectations that my children will behave a certain way, meet a certain type of person, have a certain future. But actually, when none of that aligns with my expectation of them, then what's the learning? I need to let go of my expectation of other people and just live my life authentically. And they can live their life however they want to live it without any judgment from me.
Yeah.
But that's something when you come into a place of wisdom and understanding yourself, but that's a journey you need to go on. How do we do that? How do we live authentic lives? What does it take?
Well, I think it's understanding who you are and, as we just said, liking all of ourselves, the flaws and all. So, you know, the good, the bad and the ugly, because we've all got bits of us that are perhaps not very pleasant. But once we learn to accept that, and actually when we do fall in love with ourselves, flaws and all, and we talk about, you know, you don't necessarily have to change things, you don't necessarily have to stop being who you are or stop being a part of yourself. When you do find that level of self-acceptance and self-compassion, often the bits that you don't like about yourself don't hang around that long anyway. They might come out, you know, there might be a bit of jealousy, for instance. Nobody likes to feel jealous. That's not a nice feeling to feel. But we all have a little bit in us somewhere. And we might go, oh, I never want to feel jealous again. Well, life doesn't really work like that.
But doesn't jealousy come from judgment?
Yeah, well, either, and we don't like to be judgmental either. Whichever one it is, however we're feeling, if that rears its head when we love ourselves, we can kind of investigate why we're feeling like that. Did I put an expectation on? Am I being judgy? Am I just not feeling that great about myself, therefore I'm feeling jealous of that? Or what is it that I need to give to myself so I'm not jealous of that person? So actually, you don't then berate yourself for being jealous. You actually just go, oh yeah, I wonder why that's reared its head. I'm going to investigate it and then I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
I'm going to accept it. And therefore you're not beating yourself up.
Yeah.
And you're still free.
And that comes back to what we always talk about. If you're going to investigate it, you've got to be aware of why that feeling came up in me. I'm jealous of that person. I've obviously judged that person. Why am I judging that person? Because I'm critical of them, or I'm trying to look for something which is a weakness in me. My own unhappiness, my own ego has been belittled, or it's insecure, or feeling inadequate. Therefore, if I in my mind put somebody else down, I'm making myself feel better, or I'm jealous they've got something that I want. What is it that I want in my life that I haven't created for myself? What is that aspect of awareness? It's interesting because there's a study done by Kernis and Goldman, and they have found that a sense of authenticity is accompanied by a multitude of benefits. People who score high on the authenticity profile are also more likely to respond to difficulties with effective coping strategies, which is what we're looking for in life, isn't it? How do we cope effectively? How do we impact mental health? Rather than resorting to drugs, alcohol, or self-destructive habits. They often report having satisfying relationships. They enjoy a sense of self-worth and purpose, confidence in mastering challenges, and the ability to follow through in pursuing goals. They suggest why people crave authenticity, as those low in authenticity are likely to be defensive, suspicious, confused, easily overwhelmed, and we've just talked about judgmental and jealous. Yeah. So the benefits of being fully authentic are obviously huge. Our goal, therefore, is to become aware at this stage in my life, who around me do I gossip about? Who do I judge? Who do I criticize, condemn? Who am I speaking about? Because actually all that attention needs to be put onto me instead of somebody else. Mm-hmm. What are my weaknesses? What are my flaws? Where am I not congruent with who I am and my values? And actually further back than that, what are my values? What are my core beliefs? What are my needs? So it might be listeners actually start from writing down my core values, my beliefs, my needs.
And when I was talking earlier about how I do really try to live my life in authenticity, I know when I'm not because I get an icky feeling.
Yeah.
So something comes up, like something might happen and I just feel kind of uneasy. And all those words that you said, you know, like the negative kind of words, they start to come out. And it's not who I naturally am. So then I have to go away and investigate it. What am I not being authentic? What have I not done that isn't in line with my values? And that's exactly it. So if you know what your values are, and there's some beautiful words out there, you know, and often people's values are things like freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom, respect, joy, family, love, you know.
Harmony.
Yeah, they're usually just one beautiful word, you know, but lots of them. And often we live by, we might have 50 values, but we really only live by a core. There's probably between 3 and 5 values that we can tick off each day. And if we can filter our life through them values, then therefore we're living authentically. So I don't know about you, but my values are kindness, integrity, honesty, and authenticity. So if I put that through the filter and I can tick all them off, I'm happy with the decision I've made, and therefore I'm not too worried about what other people think of me. Because I can look at myself in the mirror and I can go, I'm happy with that decision. If I've upset you, I'm sorry about that, but you don't need to be around me. If you don't like the decisions I'm making, that's fine, but I'm happy with this decision and I feel comfortable with it. Now, I think that's the only thing that we can really ask for in life, isn't it?
Yeah. But how many people know their values? I mean, how many people know what they are? I think the other thing to be aware of also is the programming that we've been accustomed to in our lives. For example, the shoulds, the oughts, and the have-tos, which come from our culture, come from religion, come from our family upbringing, come from our school, sexuality, identity, and so on. And actually say, how can I separate? In my early 20s, I had cognitive behaviour therapy, and I went through transactional analysis, and that is incredible. If anybody wants to go on a journey to look at the patterns they've established in their life, and to unravel programming from their parents, from their teachers, from their peer group, from their culture, from their religion. It's a really interesting course to do. You could do 6 sessions, find somebody that comes recommended, because they start to put a framework into place, and they even address things like, how do you deal with anger? Are you somebody that internalizes it? Do you shout and scream? Why do you shout and scream? Why do you get cross? Is it because it's what you've witnessed before? Can you change your patterns of anger? Because anger is obviously healthy. It's a way to express pain. But how do we deal with consequences in our life? And am I, again, being congruent with who I am? If one of my values is peace and gentleness, and yet I'm getting angry the whole time, I'm not congruent with who I would like to be. So how can I become that person? What courses can I do? Can I listen to podcasts? Can I go into some online courses and so on? So we can constantly learn, can't we?
Absolutely, and often it's
Set
about
challenges.
practicing, isn't it? You know, like you, as you just said, anger's a really good one to bring up because people are frightened of anger. But at the end of the day, we often go into fight, flight, or freeze, don't we?
Yeah.
And anger definitely falls into that, I'd say. You know, when some of us are in eruption, we erupt like a volcano. We yell, we scream. Some people, as you say, go and stew. Some people might go and break things. There's various different levels of anger, isn't there? And there's no right or wrong. But if you're okay behaving the way you are, well, okay, but are you hurting people?
Yeah.
So it's a really good one to look at because it is quite confronting. And it tells us a lot about ourselves. Now, I used to be a yeller. I used to yell all the time, but why did I yell? As you say, it's certain things within us. I don't really recall my mum and dad yelling a lot, so I can't blame anybody.
Is it nature or nurture? Is it personality?
And I am a fighter, so if somebody comes to me, I will naturally want to fight back. You know, that's just part of my personality. We are all cavemen at the end of the day. We haven't evolved that much, have we? So it's about looking at who you are. Well, the last thing I would ever want to do is hurt anybody. So if I yell, I feel like that's a way of hurting people, and I would definitely don't like to yell things that I don't mean, and I don't do that. But can I deal with my anger in a better way? Yes, I can. I've got to go back and find out why I'm angry, because angry is a second emotion. So what is it that's making me angry? What's the first feeling? And I have to go back and deal with that. And do I really want to yell at people? No. So I don't. But it's taken me a journey to get there, you know, and occasionally, again, I can still be human. I can still have a yell, and I go, oh, goodness, that came from nowhere. And I haven't yelled for a while, but here we are. But it's about practicing, isn't it? And I'll try and do something different. And even if it's just taking yourself away from the situation and going to the bathroom and breathe 3 times, and then come back and answer a question, rather than go back with a knee-jerk reaction, how you did in the past. And the anger is just one emotion. There's many other ways to look at it.
And as you say, you know, you want to change it, so it's practice, but you can't practice it and you can't change it unless you're aware of it. So very clearly you're aware of it because you say, this is how I react, this is how I respond. But it's actually looking at ourselves rather than looking at other people and say, what are my behaviour patterns? What have I established that maybe I don't like? What can I change? Another interesting concept is comparison. How do we live in the world of comparison? Again, coming back to teenagers and also we're raising 8 teenagers between us. How do we raise our teenagers? What do we expect of them? And the world of comparison is so important. So, you know, from the milestones we set, my child is still in nappies age 2. Does it really matter when you compare to others? We want to say that our child's out of nappies at 18 months. I'm really proud of myself as a mum because I managed to achieve it. Does that really matter? But when it comes to your teenagers, one thing that's been really interesting to me is that I was teaching when I was very young. I was 21, 22. And lots of my students were slightly older. They were 18, 19. So they're only 2 to 3 years younger than me. On Facebook now, those students I had when I was 21, 22 are still obviously now 2, 3 years younger than me. And when I look at the ones that failed at school, they're often the ones that have been most successful because they're entrepreneurial, set up their own businesses. Those that were very much programmed into the stereotypical careers are the ones that maybe are not so happy in their life now because they've got this programmed career, a society kind of expectation. They'd make lots of money and therefore go into those careers, but not so happy, haven't found fulfillment. They're not actually doing what they love doing. That's not everybody, but those certainly where there's lots of pressure from parents to conform to a certain type of future. So my message, having experienced hundreds of teenagers come through my hands, is set your child free to do what they want to do. If it's to play music, it's to play music. If it's to be a hairdresser, it's to be a hairdresser. Have no expectations what your child is going to do. Set them free and actually say to your child, what are your values? What do you love doing? What are you passionate about? And what did your child used to do when they were 2 and 3? Did they used to get their doll and cut their hair the whole time because they love doing it? It's the creativity. But the frightening thing for me, having been a teacher for so long, is to watch so many parents put expectations on their children. And were the expectations something they wanted to do in their life and yet didn't do, as opposed to set their child free.
Absolutely. It's a dangerous cycle, isn't it, really, to go through. I'm going to read a lovely quote by Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote Conversations.
Love Neil Donald Walsh.
He is a great
amazing
voice of wisdom and very spiritual man. And he says, your personal freedom to experience yourself and life as you wish is not being limited. Step into your choices and stop telling yourself that you can't, when what you really mean is that you don't want other people to feel the way you think that they are going to feel when they see you making the choices you really want to make. Now, that's a very big mouthful, but it is powerful. And if you think about it, what he's trying to say is your personal freedom to experience you and your life is not being limited. So it's all out there for the taking. It's your choice, you decide. But you have to step into your choices and you have to be confident in your choices. And once you are confident in your choices, no longer will you be worried about what those people are going to think of you. And sometimes we worry about what those people are going to think of us. We don't really know what's in their head either. So you spend a whole heap of time worrying about what people might think of you and the choices you make, when in actual fact, if you are living by your values, if you are making congruent decisions, if you are happy with the choices you are making, so long as you are not intentionally hurting other people or causing any harm, as long as you are living in integrity, then I think that's the way to go, isn't it?
Absolutely, because to be completely self-aware is to be knowledgeable and trust in one's own motives, emotions, preferences and abilities. I've got a lovely quote here. You attract the right things when you have a sense of who you are. So when you have that sense of who you are and you're congruent and you're in authenticity, then amazing coincidences happen, you meet the right people, the right opportunities come your way. And it's not that you need to even force things in life. Doors will open for you, ahead of you. And you and I think are finding that in our work, aren't we? And
absolutely.
In our personal lives as well, that the more congruent we become, the more, whether you say it's miracles, coincidences, or whatever it is, the more amazing things happen. And you just say, gosh, you wouldn't believe what happened today. But actually you can live a life like that because you're in alignment with what the universe has got laid out for you.
I agree. I've got one more quote. It says, freedom lies in being bold. And that's by Robert Frost. And I agree, you know, so many people are under the constraints of others. And that's where it's like too busy worrying about societal expectations, what our parents want for us, what our children want, what the neighbour wants, what the people down the road are doing, trapped in comparison. Society does have expectations on us, and there's a way that it looks like it should be, but start questioning that. Is that really how it should be? Do we all need to own our own home? Do we all need to drive a fast car? And this is only in this culture. You know, you transport yourself from here to another culture. Let's go to Africa, for instance. Do I need to think that I have to do X, Y, Z because that's what the people in my village are doing? Or can I have aspirations to leave this village and go and be a doctor? Do you know what I mean? Societal expectations are different around the world, but we get stuck in this place in the world where we're living right here and now, and we think that's how it needs to be. Question it. The great people who make changes have questioned everything. And the people who we admire the most often, and we read all these beautiful quotes by, like the Dalai Lama, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, these people have found freedom because they are being true to who they are.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think we don't like so much the children that are disruptive and rebellious. But actually, you're talking about being bold, and we can only be bold when we disrupt the normal theory, or we stand up for what we believe in, or we see differently to the conformity of society and actually be rebellious. And we are both those things, I think, you and I, in terms of personalities.
Just a little bit.
They did an amazing experiment. They had, when we were at CBT and they were doing anger management, they had a case scenario that you had to role play. So they had a bus and you all had to, they moved the chairs so there are 2 rows on both sides of the aisle and you all sat in a place in the bus. And then somebody came on the bus and they were drunk, they were arrogant, they wanted a seat on the bus, they were shouting, and they kind of pulled somebody out of that seat, an old lady out of the seat. They all want to sit there, and they actually pulled the old lady out of the seat, so we had to role play that situation. And they asked us all to respond according to how we would actually respond on that bus. So it was really interesting because some people just sat there and watched it happen, and I was amazed because I actually went up and I got the guy and went, get out of the seat now, and shouted at the person. And then we evaluated how everyone responded at the end, but it was, some people are introverts, some people are extroverts, some people will speak for what they believe in, some people will stand up for injustice, some people are passive watchers actors and players, and everyone was okay. You know, there was no right or wrong in the situation. But my response was, there's no way in front of me I'm going to watch that happen. Out. I'll maybe sit down. But it made you think about life, and it made you think about the way you react in situations where we take it for granted, or we just kind of carry on with our habits and behaviours without analysing them. So I think if you're listening, the key thing is to be congruent, to be authentic. You need to first of all be aware.
But on that other, what you've just said there, that story's just made me think about something. And actually, sometimes, like the things that we know that we perhaps should change, for instance, I said I'm quite fiery and I used to be a yeller and a shouter. I'm a very passionate person, right? So I will talk loud as well. So I don't ever want to take that part away from me. But what you just said then about the bus and the injustice, I remember getting the ferry over to the city one day, and there was a girl being hit by a group of men, and people just stood around and watched. Now, it was that part of me that fires up in anger when I do yell. That was the part of me that made me go over and help her and stop it from happening. So actually, when we talk about loving ourselves, flaws and all, and understanding ourselves, we've got to understand sometimes what might be seen as a negative can also be seen as a positive in some situations as well, and actually can help us.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily want to knock things out of us either. We just want to behave in a way that's pleasant for people to be around, and that we don't hurt people, but is in line with our values.
Absolutely. And you and I went on a course where we did strengths assessment, and we looked at our 5 key strengths. Then we turned them around into our weaknesses. So obviously our strengths are our weaknesses. It's what we talked about earlier. We need to love the warts and all about ourselves. It's not that we need to get rid of parts of our life, because if you're passionate, which is you're a highly passionate person, that's because you can create change. Without the passion behind the desire that you see to, where there's an area of change that's needed, you won't be able to create that change. But also put your passion into a 5-year-old child who wants to get the sweets off the top shelf of the supermarket and the mum said no, then it can turn into a tantrum. Obviously, all your strengths are your weaknesses as well, and that's for everything in our life. So if you then turn it around, what are your weaknesses? Then turn your weaknesses into your strengths. And I think I've said before that one of my children is highly stubborn, but I never use the word stubborn, I use tenacious. He's going to get things done, he's going to fight, and actually he's now quite interested in studying law, and I think, gosh, you'd actually be the best ever barrister in court, because you would fight your ground, you'd not let anyone have a word in it,
pain in the ass,
and you would win your case in court because it's tenacious. But to be a child and to be stubborn, it's really difficult to raise that child. Really, really difficult.
Usually when you just want them to wear the red pants but they want to wear the blue ones, and you're like, can we just leave the house, please?
And you haven't got any blue ones.
Actually, have the freedom, wear whichever ones you want to wear, and then we'll go.
So we're all on a journey. We've given you some tools and techniques. It's really starting to think about, who am I? What are my values? What are my beliefs? Am I being congruent? And actually sometimes to write things down really helps, doesn't
I think writing is one of the best things. It's very therapeutic, getting a pen and paper or pencil and paper. It just gives us something in our brain and our psyche. It's much more therapeutic than typing, and I don't know, I just love doing it, and it gets all those words down on paper. Just think about what's important to you. What do you like in other people? You know, when you see something, you've got a good friend, what is it about them that you like? Because often when we see things about people, what we like, they're the things that are our values. And then the things that repel us about other people, they're often things about us that perhaps we need to change. So have a look around, write things down, but then also think about it. You know, we are all here. We are all amazingly unique. And if you are too busy thinking about what everybody else is thinking about you and making decisions that please everybody else but aren't making you feel the best, then actually the only person you're hurting is you. And you are with you 24/7, and this is your one true life. So if you can live it by your values with a certain level of freedom, then you're super lucky.
And also alongside being congruent and authentic is, as you were talking about, loving yourself. So we do have a fantastic podcast on finding self-love. So have a listen to that one too.
Well, I'm going to read out the definition of freedom one more time. So freedom is the power to or right to act, speak or think as one wants, and the state of not being imprisoned or enslaved. Now I love that, because that doesn't necessarily mean to be in prison or a slave to other people. If you think about it in a metaphorical way, if we are not behaving in a way that is congruent with ourselves, then we are enslaved and we are imprisoned. If we're always doing things for other people, by other people's expectations, then that's exactly where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just leave it with another one, which is in line with that. Don't trade your authenticity for approval.
Love it. And one last thing. That is why humans resist life. To be alive is the biggest fear humans have. Death is not the biggest fear we have. Our biggest fear is taking the risk to be alive. The risk to be alive and express what we really are. Just being ourselves is the biggest fear of humans. We have learned to live our lives trying to satisfy other people's demands. We have learned to live by other people's points of view because of the fear of not being accepted and of not being good enough for someone else. So if we can all live authentically and if we can be more accepting of others, that is freedom. Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.